He inherited nothing but an old wardrobe and the ridicule of his relatives. But behind its carved doors was a secret that would turn his family's history upside down. Write in the comments where you're watching this story from, and don't forget to subscribe. Thank you.
The Boston law office smelled of expensive leather and old money. Behind the polished mahogany desk sat Mr. Harrison, and across from him the Anderson family had gathered for the reading of their eccentric Uncle Arthur's will. Lucas Anderson, a modest archivist at the public library, sat to the side, feeling out of place at this display of wealth and anticipation. His cousins, dressed in tailored suits, whispered among themselves, speculating on the size of the inheritance. "Now then," Mr. Harrison adjusted his glasses, "Arthur Anderson leaves his main estate and real property." He began reading a long list, earning approving nods from the relatives. When it came to Lucas, the room fell silent. "To Lucas Anderson is bequeathed an 18th-century oak cabinet from the late Arthur's workshop." The room erupted in laughter. Cousin Chad clapped Lucas on the shoulder. "Congratulations, Lou! Found your calling. Antique dealer. Hope at least no moths have made themselves at home in it." Aunt Barbara shook her head with pity. "Poor boy. Arthur was always peculiar. Well, maybe you can sell it for wood and get something out of it." Lucas silently took the heavy antique key handed to him by the lawyer. His fingers closed around the cold metal. The family's humiliating jibes burned in his ears, but a strange sense of anticipation stirred in his chest. Uncle Arthur was not a madman. He was the wisest in their family. Stepping onto the streets of Boston, Lucas gazed at the key in his palm. This simple object suddenly felt like a ticket to another life. Maybe the old cabinet held more than dust and cobwebs. Perhaps behind its doors lay a story capable of changing everything.
Uncle Arthur's garage in the Boston suburbs smelled of dust, oil, and memories. Lucas stood before the massive oak cabinet that nearly spanned the back wall. Carved panels with intricate patterns, dark wood cracked with age. It looked like a relic from another century. Inheritance, Lucas thought bitterly, running his hand over the rough surface. Cousin Chad's mocking laughter still echoed in his ears. The key turned with effort in the lock, groaning and creaking, echoing through the empty garage. Inside, the air smelled of lavender and old paper. The shelves were cluttered with a random assortment of objects: boxes of nails, glass vials, brushes with dried paint. Nothing valuable. Lucas was about to close the door when his eye caught a small metal box tucked into the shadow beneath the lower shelf. A simple tin container, its paint faded and chipped. Inside lay a bundle of letters tied with twine and a worn, leather-bound journal. Sitting on an old wooden crate, Lucas began to read. The pages were filled with his Uncle Arthur's neat handwriting. At first, there were technical notes on furniture restoration, but toward the end, the entries became more personal. March 15. They all laugh at my hobby, say I waste my life on rags, but they don't see the truth. The greatest secrets are hidden in the simplest things. The cabinet, my greatest discovery. The key is in the pattern on the left panel. Eliza would be proud. The entry ended abruptly. Lucas read the line again. Eliza. It had to be his great-grandmother Elizabeth, a figure scarcely mentioned in the family. And what did he mean by, "The key is in the pattern"? He stepped closer to the cabinet, studying the carved panels carefully. Flowers, leaves, intertwined branches, and then his gaze landed on a small section of ornamentation on the left door. Here, the carving was deeper, and among the standard roses and acanthus leaves stood a solitary sunflower surrounded by stalks of wheat. He ran his fingers over the carved flower. The wood was smooth, polished by countless touches. He pressed the center of the sunflower. Nothing. Then he carefully pressed one of the wheat stalks. A quiet, distinct click echoed in the stillness of the garage. A small section of the panel slid aside, revealing a hidden compartment. Lucas froze, his heart hammering. Cousins' laughter, their derisive looks, none of it mattered anymore. Uncle Arthur had left him more than furniture. He had left a puzzle. The first thread of a mystery that had waited over a century to be unraveled.
In the hidden compartment of the cabinet lay a stack of canvases, neatly tied with linen cloth. Lucas's heart pounded as he untied the cord. Beneath the fabric were the paintings, small but astonishing in their intensity. The first depicted a young man at an easel against the backdrop of Boston Harbor. Bold strokes, a daring play of light, completely uncharacteristic for the academic style of the late 19th century. On the back, a signature, E.A., 1888. One by one, Lucas examined the canvases. Portraits, landscapes, scenes of urban life. Each piece breathed freedom and a talent far ahead of its time. But the one that struck him most was a small self-portrait. A young woman with dark hair tied simply in a bun gazed out from the canvas with intelligent, slightly sorrowful eyes. In her hand, a paintbrush. In the background, he could make out the very cabinet he now stood before. Among the paintings lay a thin, leather-bound notebook. "Eliza Anderson's diary," Lucas whispered, tracing the embossed gold letters with his fingers. The diary's pages revealed a story the family preferred to forget. Elizabeth or Eliza Anderson, his great-grandmother, a gifted artist whose ambitions had been crushed by Victorian notions of what was a proper pursuit for a lady. April 5, 1889. Father threatens again to burn my scribbles. He says painting is no pursuit for a noble lady, that I must prepare to marry Mr. Vanderbilt. June 12, 1889. I have hidden 3 more paintings in the secret compartment of the cabinet. This is my only freedom, my only way to breathe. If they find them... January 10, 1890. The wedding is set. This is the end. Today I painted my last work, my self-portrait. I will hide it with the others. Perhaps, someday, someone will find them and understand. Lucas set the diary aside, hands trembling. He looked at Eliza's self-portrait, at her smart, sorrowful eyes. She had not died of consumption, as family lore claimed. She had died of a broken dream, of a talent suffocated before it could flourish. A sudden knock at the garage door made him jump. Through the dusty window, he saw a figure in an expensive suit. The stranger looked far too well-groomed for this neighborhood. Lucas slowly opened the door. Before him stood an elegant man in his 50s with cold blue eyes. "Lucas Anderson?" His voice was smooth as silk. "I am Alexander Vanderbilt. We have received information that you possess certain family heirlooms historically belonging to our family." A chill ran down Lucas's spine. The Vanderbilts,
the very family that had intended to marry Eliza off. Uncle Arthur's inheritance took on a new, dangerous significance.
Lucas stood in the garage doorway, the key to the cabinet clenched tightly in his pocket. Alexander Vanderbilt smiled a cold, polite smile, but his eyes were indifferent, shark-like. These concern the collection of paintings and personal effects of Elizabeth Anderson, Vanderbilt continued. My great-grandmother was married to Elizabeth's cousin. Family records confirm that these works of art are part of our heritage. Anger surged through Lucas. Elizabeth was an artist, not property. These paintings are her work, her legacy. Vanderbilt's smile narrowed slightly. We are willing to offer you generous compensation, $10,000 for all of it, money that will help you get on your feet. It was an insult disguised as an offer. Lucas knew the true value of the paintings was exponentially higher, but this wasn't about money. They are not for sale, Lucas said firmly. Vanderbilt stepped forward, his voice lowering, menacing yet smooth. Lucas, let me give you a piece of advice. Don't cling to the past, especially not to something that can bring trouble. Our family has a long memory and vast resources. Consider your future. Consider a quiet life. He swept a disdainful glance across the garage. We will contact you tomorrow. I am confident you will make the reasonable choice. Without waiting for an answer, Vanderbilt turned and walked to his dark sedan. The car slid silently into the evening shadows. Lucas closed the door and leaned against it, hands trembling. He looked around at the paintings spread across the garage. Eliza's bold gaze from her self-portrait seemed to ask, now what? They had taken her freedom in life. Now they wanted to take her legacy. Lucas pulled out his phone and dialed his friend Sarah, a reporter at the Boston Globe. Sarah, I need your help. You won't believe what I found. As he spoke, his eyes fell on Eliza's diary. The last entry. Perhaps, someday, someone will find them and understand. She had found someone who understood, and he wasn't going to give up. Not even if it meant taking on one of Boston's most powerful families.
40 minutes later, Sarah arrived at the garage, her eyes alight with the excitement of a reporter who had smelled a major scoop. She froze at the threshold when she saw the paintings. "Oh my God, Lucas, this is incredible," she breathed, carefully lifting Eliza's self-portrait. "The technique, the style. This is a precursor to American Impressionism. How has no one ever heard of her?" Lucas quickly recounted the story from the diary. As he spoke, Sarah's frown deepened. "The Vanderbilts want to bury this in the 21st century?" she exclaimed, clenching her fists. "Not on my watch." She immediately started calling her contacts in the museum world. Within a few hours, an art historian from the Museum of Fine Arts and a Harvard historian had arrived at the garage. The examination lasted into the evening, and their verdict was unanimous. The works were of extraordinary artistic and historical significance. The next morning, Sarah organized a press conference right in front of the public library where Lucas worked. When journalists saw the paintings, camera flashes lit up the square. Nervously adjusting his tie, Lucas stepped up to the microphones. He didn't mention the Vanderbilts. He told Eliza's story, her dreams, her struggle, the talent that had been locked away in a cabinet. "She never wanted fame," Lucas said, his voice growing stronger with each word. "She wanted the freedom to create. And today, we are giving her art back that freedom that was taken from her." The story made front-page headlines. The Boston Globe ran a piece titled, "Forgotten Genius: How Victorian Prejudices Buried a Talent." Social media erupted in outrage. The Vanderbilts tried to issue a rebuttal through their lawyers, but their voices were drowned out by the wave of public indignation. Legal threats now seemed laughable against the rising scandal. That evening, Lucas received a message from the director of the Museum of Fine Arts. "Mr. Anderson, we would like to acquire the entire collection for our permanent holdings. We will create a dedicated gallery named after Eliza Anderson." Lucas stepped out of the library. The evening air was cool and fresh. He looked out at the city lights, and for the first time in a long while, felt not anxiety, but deep, quiet satisfaction. He hadn't become rich like his cousins, but he had restored a forgotten name to the world and brought justice to a silenced talent.
6 months later, the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston buzzed with ceremonial energy. Today was the grand opening of the gallery, Eliza Anderson, Rediscovered Legacy. Lucas stood at the entrance, nervously adjusting his tie. He barely recognized his reflection in the glass door, a confident man in a sharp suit, not the timid archivist he had been 6 months ago. The gallery was bathed in light. On the walls, perfectly illuminated, hung Eliza's paintings, the very ones he had uncovered in that dusty cabinet. Now they looked alive, vibrant, breathing freedom. At the center of the room hung her self-portrait, the final one, with that bold, unwavering gaze. Sarah approached, beaming. "Show her. All tickets are sold out for a month. The Art Institute of Chicago wants to host a traveling exhibition. Lucas, this is incredible." He nodded, his eyes scanning the paintings. He wasn't just seeing canvases, he was witnessing victory. Victory over oblivion, over greed, over prejudice. Across the gallery, he noticed his relatives. They stood a little apart, subdued and quiet. Chad caught his gaze and, after a pause, gave a small, respectful nod. No more mockery lingered. As the gallery neared closing, an elderly woman approached Lucas. "Excuse me, are you Lucas Anderson? I'm the great-granddaughter of Eliza's sister. Our family only had a single sketch of hers and stories about her talent. Thank you. Thank you for bringing her back to us." Lucas squeezed her hand, feeling a lump in his throat. This was not just his victory. It was a victory for the entire family, finally healing an old wound. The next morning, Lucas sat in his new office, not in an archive, but in a spacious room with large windows. On the wall hung a modest yet elegant sign, the Eliza Anderson Foundation for Emerging Artists. The foundation's first grant went to a talented Boston student, whose works echoed Eliza's bold strokes. The girl's radiant gratitude filled the room, and Lucas thought that now artists like her have the chance his great-grandmother never did. That evening, he returned to his apartment. His modest living room had changed. On a place of honor stood the old oak cabinet. It was no longer just furniture. It was a symbol. On its open door hung a tiny portrait of Eliza. He ran his hand over the carved sunflower, the very key to the secret all those months ago. "Thank you, Uncle Arthur. Thank you for trusting me with her." He looked out the window at the twinkling lights of Boston. He hadn't found wealth in the material sense. He had found something greater: purpose. He had become the guardian not only of Eliza's legacy, but of hope for future talent. And the old cabinet, silent witness to so many lives, had finally found peace. No longer a prison for secrets, but a sanctuary of memory and inspiration.
Each of us has our own old cabinet, forgotten stories, unspoken words, talents we hide from the world. And yet it's often in these quiet corners of the past that the keys to our present are hidden. This story reminds us that sometimes the humblest inheritances are the most precious. And beneath the dust of centuries, someone's untold truth may be waiting. If you believe that extraordinary stories can live in the most ordinary things, follow along. Ahead lie new discoveries, family secrets, and moments when the past reaches out to the present. Let's open the next door together.